And now we are recording. Okay. I don't have to redo that, do I? Okay. I'm not going to redo it. But so we're going to have the physical conference in Balm, but we found out it is a lot of effort to put on a physical conference. And even though we had a dedicated planning committee, we started meeting monthly in April. We started meeting bi-weekly in September. We started meeting weekly in October. At some point, it became apparent to us that we weren't going to be able to have the conference we wanted in person. So it's a lesson learned. Okay, you learn from your mistakes, right? So we said, but it's important to have a virtual conference. So that's, we transitioned from a physical conference to the virtual conference. So that's how we got to where we are today. So we've learned that if you're going to have a physical conference, we're probably going to have, I don't want to say this right now, but we're probably going to have our first planning coordination meeting not too long after today. And we're going to go ahead and during our closing this afternoon, I'll go ahead and put a link out there to a neat Google form that Ashley put together that will allow you to go ahead, if you're interested, to give us your contact info, whether you can volunteer the day of or the planning committee, or if you're just interested, you want to investigate, at least we'll have your contact info on file and we can reach out to you. This is all volunteer, okay? These people unselfishly give up their Wednesday lunch hour from 12 to 1 to go ahead and try to fill that void of having a regional GeoFlo or GIS user conference in West Central Florida. Okay, so that's how we got to where we are today. Let's talk about today just a little bit. I don't want to go too long here, but Ashley and Wendy put together a neat website. So that's what I have up on my screen right now. And obviously registration is closed. I mean, registration started way back, I don't even know, back in July or something. And obviously a lot of these people were registered for November 10th. And so we didn't go ahead and start a new registration. We just continued with the registration. So yeah, we have 162. But there is one good aspect of having a virtual conference in there. It's you are not constrained by location. Hey, well, we're GIS mappers. So guess what we're going to put on our homepage? We're going to put a map on there. Okay. So as people registered, as you know, you went ahead and put in your address, your zip code or something of that sort. So we dropped a pin on the map where that was located. And it's just kind of interesting to kind of see how far we reach out with this virtual conference. So we're all over Florida, but not only are we spread out through Florida, if you kind of zoom out here, we have points up the eastern seaboard. We have somebody way out here on the West Coast. We have some folks up in Canada. Even more so than that, we have, kind of hard to see with these dots, but we have somebody in Finland. I don't know if they're with us right now. I know there's a time change. It's probably about 6 or 7 hours ahead over there. Kind of hard to see, but we do have somebody in Dubai and Cairo. So that's kind of the neat aspect. But here's a little trivia question for you, and Ashley, you can't answer. Why do I have a point in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? Okay, this is a common problem. Okay, obviously it's not a correct coordinate. What coordinate is that? Longitude, latitude. Anybody want to guess? No talkers? Nobody wants to be brave? That is
it's 0, 0.
That is 0, 0. And I thought, why have I had a point there before? Well, guess what? That's because somebody typed in 0, 0, or that's your default value. And so it's always good to give your data set a little QA, QC in there. So I thought that was interesting. That's way out in the middle of the Atlantic. So obviously that's not going to be mentioned, but it doesn't realize, but that is a very profound spot, I guess, GIS wise. But we are in this part of Florida. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. I see we're up to 69 people. As I said, it took a lot of effort to put on this conference. We have a planning team I want to recognize at the end of the conference for sure, because their efforts deserve to be recognized, and they unselfishly give of their time and their lunch hours. And I'm happy to give them their lunch hours back for a little while anyway. All right. So talk about today, let's look at, we also have this kind of a neat website. It's easy to navigate. I love a website that's easy to navigate, straightforward. Let's click on the agenda. And I want to thank all the presenters for being flexible, because the same program of presenters we had for November 10th, we have for January 26th. So I appreciate them being flexible and working with us to go ahead and at least present in 2023. But welcome session, Parker Hinson, Dr. Hinson is going to give us our keynote address. Florida's geospatial data response to Hurricane Ian. And we're kind of calling this session 1. We have 3 presentations. We told people, you know, when you sign up for a presentation, we don't want people to be intimidated by the thought of presenting to 69 people online. Okay, so you can sign up for a 15 or a 30-minute. You could do a 5-minute presentation for that matter. So be thinking about that, because you cannot put on the conference without presenters. Okay, so thank you to the presenters. Addie Javed is going to present a building block for digital transformation. I will be the host of session 1, and then I'll end it with an intern. Love to get an intern's perspective, so I'm looking forward to Emily's talk from SWFWMD. The typical format for a presentation is and please, you know, mute all your mics so we don't have a lot of background chatter, so we can all focus on what the presenter is saying. But the presenter will go ahead and make the presentation, and then we'll have a short 5-minute Q&A session at the end, and you can either ask a question by typing it into the chat. We have people for behind the scenes on a planning committee monitoring the chat. You can raise your hand virtually, or you can unmute yourself and go ahead and chime in verbally if you want to do that. But we do ask that you wait to the end of the presentation to allow the presenter to get through all of his material. Okay, so that's session 1. We got all day, and there's no breakout rooms. It's one track. So it's pretty easy. Now, I will say, if you have to go somewhere and you have to stop the meeting, you can't keep it going in the background, and you come back in, you'll be put back in the waiting room. But we can go ahead and we'll have people monitoring the waiting room, and hopefully you won't have to wait too long for your let back in. Okay. Then we have session 2. You'll have a different, you won't have to look at me all day long. I know you're thankful for that, as I am. But session 2 starts at 10:45. So we have Ryan Beggy from Manatee County. I want to thank Yusuf Kadora. We've already had a great conversation with him from the University of Florida, talking about something important, should be important to all of us, our career development. And then I want to highlight the fact that 11:40, we have a user group roundup. Again, there's no breakout rooms. We're just all going to get together, and we're going to give representatives from each user group an opportunity to kind of talk about what their plans are for 2023 and try to get some energy going for the user groups to start meeting again. Because I think good things happen when you bring GIS people together, and that's kind of what's been missing. I, for one, work at a very large organization called the DOT District 7, and we have a total of 2 GIS people there, which is great, but it's good to have, you know, 70 people on the conference call. We all walk away better for it. We are going to have a lunch from 12:10 to 1:10 and open networking. So that by that, we mean we're just going to keep the meeting open. We're not going to close the meeting. It's not going to be moderated. So understand that we don't have any breakout rooms. So you know, everybody's going to hear what you're saying. So you probably can direct chat somebody. And then we'll close it out. Session 3, we got Shannon on the planning committee. Thanks for stepping up and doing a presentation, talking about the path to their utility network. Gustavo's going to be talking about spatial metadata management, very important. Wendy, managed services. And Richard's going to close us out by talking about FIG working week. So we'll all learn what FIG is about. And finally, I'll come back on at 2:40 for the closing session. And yes, we do have a raffle. We have 4 at-home licenses of Esri and a gift certificate to a restaurant. Okay, so that is a full agenda. So let me stop sharing. All right. So I can't think of anything else administrative wise. I will say this, you know, like I said, it takes a lot of hard work to put on something like this, even a virtual conference. It takes a lot of hard work, much less a physical. And we want to have a physical conference in 2023, probably a November timeframe. The planning committee will decide that. But if you're interested at all in becoming more involved and helping to make that happen, we are going to put probably Ashley, when you get a chance, go ahead and put in the chat a link to a cool Google form that she's put together. Very simple, straightforward for us to get your contact info. You're under no obligation, but at least we have your contact info. So if an opportunity does become available, and trust me, it will become available, you can go ahead and volunteer as well and help make GIS better in West Central Florida. Okay, so all righty. So I've got 9:12. I don't know if I have a timer for my talk, but I want to stay on schedule. I know we're scheduled, I think, for the first presentation to start at 9:15. So if I can just find my notes here to introduce our first speaker, that would be awesome. So Parker, if you want to, you can go ahead and share your screen while I introduce you. That would be awesome. So we are privileged to have as our keynote speaker, Dr. Parker Hinson. Okay. He is the GIS lead for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and Florida Geographic Information Office. Parker manages the agency's enterprise GIS platform and its robust geodata library, as well as provides project management oversight of geospatial initiatives within the Office of Technology and Information Services. Prior to his role at FDEP, Parker was the GIS manager for the Florida Department of Health, where he led geospatial data response to Hurricane Michael. That was quite the hurricane. He is also former program director of the NSLC, the National Student Leadership Conference. Thanks, I thought I was going to be put on the spot because I didn't know what that acronym was. When Parker is not working in a version of the Matrix, you'll find him unplugged and enjoying the many outdoor opportunities in the Tallahassee area with his wife, Rebecca, and their 2 dogs. And this is really exciting. I read this beforehand, so I'm happy to report they are expecting their first child. Congratulations, Parker. Your life will change forever, but trust me, it's for the better. They are expecting their first child in just a few weeks and are excited for what 2023 will bring. That's awesome. Thank you, Parker. He's going to be talking about Florida's geospatial data response to Hurricane Ian. So without any further ado, Parker, I will turn it over to you if you want to go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Thank you so much, Steve. Yeah, 2023 is definitely going to be a unique year for us, but we're very excited. That's one adjective to describe our feelings. But we are, more than excited. So we've got a couple weeks left, and I'm spending a lot of my extra time right now wrapping up a nursery and all the nesting that goes along with that. So thank you so much, Steve, and to GeoFlo for inviting me to present today. I'm excited to kind of talk about our data response to, at the time, it was just Hurricane Ian. And then kind of Hurricane Nicole came onto the scene. So just a little asterisk for the presentation is that the coordination response that we did have here at DEP and through the GIO is related to kind of both of the hurricanes, though the majority of our response was initially for Ian. But I'll kind of just talk about some of those coordination that we did for that event. So I think it's important to also have kind of just an understanding of coordination and data management from an emergency management response. So I'll kind of start the talk there and then branch into our perspective again at FDEP and through the GIO's office, which DEP administers. So that's the connection there, is that DEP administers the Geographic Information Office and houses Kimberly Jackson as our Geographic Information Officer. So. Yeah. Oh, I don't think my screen's sharing, is it? Did it stop?
No, your screen isn't sharing. Now it is.
Great. Do you just see the slide, or do you see all the content?
Yep. It's just the slide.
Great. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you so much. I think looking back at some of these images too is pretty incredible. Just what Ian did to the state. At the time for Hurricane Michael, I was at the Florida Department of Health and managed a lot of the search and rescue and disaster assessment side of that. So completely 2 different storms. We learned a lot from Hurricane Michael, and I think that really did kind of help with the response to Ian and Nicole as well. Steve, thank you again for the brief introduction. I am the lead here at DEP and GIO. I'm also, you mentioned a couple of the professional affiliations around the state. If you're not involved in any of yours locally, GeoFlo and West Coast Florida has got some great groups. I'm actually the vice president for Shrug out here in the Tallahassee area. That's the Seven Hills Regional User Group. There are hills in Florida, and that the largest one happens to be out this way. Though we do joke sometimes that it's the Shrug, the Zero Hills Regional User Group area. So We do have a Shrug and Gnar in June of every year, and then our main workshop is in November. So if you're in the area and you want to join, that's a really great opportunity to meet some geospatially minded individuals here and in the surrounding areas, even up into Georgia and kind of Thomasville area. I'm a proud ERISA member, so I participate in two of those committees, the Policy Advisory Group and then the Climate Change and Climate Equity Group as well. I am a University of Florida graduate, so go Gators. I make it a point every Friday to wear my orange and blue, even though I'm here over in Tallahassee. So Tallahassee is beautiful. Love being able to explore everything that's outside and all of our wonderful state parks that are in the area. But I make sure to represent UF well. And yes, and then preparing to be a dad for the first time. So I'm really looking forward to kind of pulling as many jokes from my database, right? Beforehand it was just regular jokes, but now I get to claim that they're actually dad jokes. So all right. Without further ado, so today's overview, I'm going to talk about the role that GIS plays in emergency management and hurricane response, the effective use of geospatial technology and data during emergency situations, geospatial coordination during the coordination aspect of that during emergencies, and then our Florida's kind of geospatial coordination, what we did, what we focused on, and then some of the lessons learned or limitations to consider during a geospatial response. So I'm actually going to, because I'm looking at multiple screens, I don't want to, let's see if I can, I'm just going to turn off my video. So then that way we can kind of focus on the slides here. And then I'll hop back on for questions at the end. All right, so while many of us use GIS and consume geospatial data during states of emergencies, I would argue that it's principally important to understand just how to effectively use geospatial technology to manage and respond to emergency situations. So GIS really helps emergency managers and responders in many ways. Besides it being specific to the type of disaster or emergency, obviously this presentation is focused more so on hurricanes. That can certainly kind of change certain aspects of the response. But overall, GIS really helps us with real-time mapping, acquisition of imagery, and access to that imagery. That is, fortunately, you know, there's a lot of things that we have to worry about during a disaster, and part of that shouldn't be purchasing or having to acquire hard to find or hard to get data. So a lot of imagery and resources are provided open source during emergencies, and that's vitally helpful. We have asset and critical infrastructure identification. That's kind of shown in the image here on the right. I believe this is actually from the GIC, but we're beginning to utilize AI and deep learning models and information collected from previous storms to identify structures that have been damaged. We can do that through identification of building footprints. And this has come a long way since the Hurricane Michael response, I can tell you that, because we were doing this pretty much manually over Mexico Beach. But now we have some really great models that are available that can help us assist with that. Regarding damage assessments, and I will speak on those multiple times throughout the presentation because GIS does have a kind of a pivotal role in those specific types of assessment, but there's preliminary and then there's geospatial. So the preliminary process is typically used to determine the impact and magnitude of damage and the resulting unmet needs of, say, like individuals or businesses or the community as a whole. Geospatial damage assessments are more so the kind of the capability requirements and include many components. So those may be USA structures, as I mentioned, high resolution imagery, AI-based image processing tools, or even custom-built ArcGIS Online applications, such as our emergency response hub that we have at DEP. And these types of assessments often typically involve a very large trained analytical workforce as well. So fortunately, outputs are typically made available publicly or to a large number of stakeholders. So within ArcGIS Online, for example, we utilize groups a lot, and I know FEMA does that as well. So that it's just a great way to share and collaborate content, but also to have multiple editors having access to, specific data set that they are able to kind of work on from anywhere, right? Kind of the power that GIS and the enterprise GIS grants us these days. Some other emergency uses for GIS and emergency management include resource management and coordination, specific assistance with emergency operation missions, and those provide an overall common operating picture, or a COP. We here in Tallahassee, and there's multiple EOCs kind of around the state, but we have different ESFs per agency or per organization or per law enforcement or fire marshal or military that assist the overall response via missions or tasks through Web EOC. So I wanted to include that because we may have some predefined kind of, not business needs, but we have some predefined response needs, but there's always something that can come up kind of out of the blue, and being able to be flexible is also very, very important, and lends to that kind of effective use of geospatial technology. So the role of GIS. As we all know, geographic information systems play a critical role in response to hurricane and other disasters. So this technology really allows for the collection of, the collection, management, and analysis and visualization, right, of geographic data, location, location, location. This technology can be used to support a wide range of activities prior to, during, and even after hurricane events or responses. So pre-storm or pre-event, we can think of organizing resources, planning and training. So every year prior to hurricane season, which starts June 1, we perform hurricane exercises, or we call it the HUREX. Those are vital exercises where we kind of mock a storm and allows our organization and others to kind of respond to a fake storm. I will say that last year, DEP decided to kind of throw a wrench in everybody's spokes and told people that GIS was down, that GIS would be unavailable to them during that exercise. Now, while we do have high availability here at DEP and through the GIO's office, so would that be a real world example? Probably not, but it doesn't mean, we oftentimes do have some issues with our services that we are hosting out. So GIS can go down. I don't know how many people also get help desk requests stating that their GIS is down, but that is in and of itself a needle in a haystack, right? Where do I start there? But So also pre-storm, from an enterprise standpoint, we begin to look at services we are hosting and scaling up services that we know that are going to be utilized and hit more. So, for example, the state park boundaries, right? That individual service, a lot of people, if you've ever gone to a state park and you look to, there's a website like our state map, our state park web map, that generally gets between 1.2 and 2 million hits per month. So you can just imagine what that jumped to. I think it was between 2.5 and 2.7 during just the month of over September, October kind of area during Ian and then later on Nicole. So being able to scale your services and having that foresight to do so is really important. We have scripts that we enable specifically during emergency response that provide backup and some automation tasks. And then we watch this, we watch the storm and kind of plan for landfall. Where is it going to hit? What facilities and assets are going to be impacted? During the storm, we can think of tracking the storm, various resource management, completion of tasks or missions, and then actually providing innovative solutions. So while it's not ideal during the middle of a response, oftentimes we're presented with a, hey, this task needs to be completed within the next hour. It's pretty amazing what we can do when pushed to our limits, right? And having that coordination and collaboration with multiple agencies, everybody is just all on board to help everyone, right? That's the ultimate goal. And you really see that kind of come together during the storm. Post-storm, we can think of damage assessments, various analyses that need to be conducted. But then I also wanted to mention like a hot wash, so an organizational hot wash. And I believe I have another slide a little later on, so I'll come back to that, but just keep that in mind. It's a really great way to identify some of your strengths and weaknesses during a particular event. Speaking a little bit on emergency management and planning and some of the other bullet points there, we can think of emergency management. GIS can be used to create detailed maps, right? Think evacuation routes, emergency shelters. That shelter in place app that was deployed from Division of Emergency Management was shared out on social media. So we now can kind of share that information out to a large audience. And they had an overwhelmingly positive number of responses to that shelter in place app. So the information that's collected can really be used by emergency management officials to plan and coordinate response efforts and communicate critical information to the public. I've mentioned damage assessments a little bit, so but we do kind of follow that building damage code of destroyed or major or minor or kind of not affected damage assessments. And again, it's preliminary, but it can certainly help, and it's aided by those that are boots on the ground, looking at a damaged structure. I remember Hurricane Michael. I was looking at a house and nothing seemed to be wrong with it from the top-down aerial that we were looking at. All the houses around it were completely destroyed. So, hey, is this a new building and it's just, it's still standing, or what's going on here? Later, we found out that the house itself was completely destroyed because in the area that it had landed, there was no such house prior, looking at some pre-storm imagery. So the house had actually lifted up and floated down the street and parked itself in another lot. So the top down didn't really give us that perspective. The roof was still intact, but clearly the rest of the house was damaged. So having that different perspective helps as well. When thinking about logistics, GIS can be used to create maps for transportation networks. Again, kind of that idea for, in addition to evacuation routes, but also helping to plan the movement for personnel, equipment, and supplies to prioritized affected areas. Regarding resource management, GIS can be used to track the location and status of resources. So, such as medical supplies, fuel and food. That information can be used to identify areas where resources are needed. So, resource allocation, right? And then the coordination and distribution of those resources. And then decision making. So, GIS can be used to create detailed visualizations of the data and collect that during the hurricane response. So ultimately, these lead to informed decisions about location and providing that locational intelligence to those areas where we can then allocate further resources and ultimately helping us to respond to said crisis. Geospatial technology. So some of the commonly used technology during emergencies include, well, GIS, GPS, and remote sensing. And then it's used in a variety of ways during a response. One of its main uses is mapping and visualization of the affected area. Again, this can include detailed maps of that area, you know, locations, buildings, infrastructure. But it's also used by emergency responders and government officials to plan and coordinate their response efforts. Another use of geospatial technology is tracking the storm itself. Prior to, gosh, maybe 6-7 years ago, before a lot of the hurricanes were tracked in Living Atlas, you know, that is an amazing resource to now have, which enables us to have better dashboards and provide those out to our own stakeholders, having those authoritative layers from Esri and from other organizations and entities to be able to just kind of pull right into our own desktop or web application. It's also used to support search and rescue. So using drones or aerial vehicles to survey the affected area and locate people who are in need of assistance. That was vitally important during Hurricane Ian's and Nicole, with all of the flooding. I remember specifically kind of finding and looking at satellite imagery and finding cars and boats and things 1 or 2 miles away from certain homes up in the trees. So you can then send search and rescue out, kind of like a scene from Jurassic Park. It was really, really devastating seeing some of that stuff. But then finally, geospatial technology is also used in the aftermath of the storm, right? To back to this assessment of damage and planning for recovery. So just to remind everyone, but Hurricane Ian formed September 23rd and it dissipated last year, October 2nd. It was the third costliest weather disaster in the world on record, which is really crazy to think about. But it, again, kind of comparing this to Hurricane Michael previously, that storm went through an area of Florida where there wasn't a high population density. That was not the case for Ian and Nicole. So there's a lot of damage from that. And unfortunately, it was also one of the deadliest hurricanes to strike the state of Florida since actually the 1935 Labor Day hurricane. And then again, it was the strongest storm since Hurricane Michael in 2018. This caused, I believe the state of emergency was issued on September 24th. Many public schools were closed across the state, and it even delayed the launch of NASA's Artemis 1. So talking about data coordination just for a minute, the importance of data coordination during emergencies and how that spatial technology can be used to track, used to collect, store, and share critical information is, again, I keep, a lot of this is very vital information. So sorry to keep saying everything's vital, but it really is. It truly is vital to have for a good geospatial response. Data and resource coordination can help improve outcomes for survivors, supports that decision making, enhances our information, reduces duplication of effort. That's a big one. So why recreate the wheel, or why rework a map or a piece of analysis that's already been performed? We can share that across organizations and agencies now very seamlessly, either through AGO or through portal-to-portal collaborations, specifically for large data and large files. So important here too is thinking about data standards. Again, important to kind of bring to the table certain standards as we share and utilize certain resources. Briefly on the last slide, like, you know, we kind of all work with different acronyms. So also just important to think about, you know, is that, you know, we may talk a certain language with each other, with our own peers, but just remembering, you know, certain language barriers and not even just different languages itself for diverse populations, but thinking about the importance of data dictionaries or you know, I provided Steve with what NSLC meant, so he didn't have to come up with something on the fly there.
Thank you.
Yes. This is just a quick capture of NOAA's hurricane storm imagery web app. I will have some of these resources linked later in the presentation, and happy to share that, but this is one of those resources that gets flown. Typically there's a pre-storm and or post-storm imagery that NOAA makes available for all stakeholders. All right, so kind of the meat of the talk. Here's the communication and collaboration here within Florida. General coordination was among local, state, and federal agencies, and we heavily utilized ArcGIS Online, specifically groups, but mainly AGO and hubs and dashboards. We do have some portal-to-portal collaboration set up, such as with FDOT, with FDACS, with DOH, but for whatever reason, we tend to use AGO as kind of like that go-to portal environment to share content. So that geospatial data was shared, and it helped facilitate a lot of our efforts. One of the highlights from our response and from our office here was the daily geospatial coordination calls. I recognize a lot of familiar names on here, and believe that that many of you were part of those calls. So thank you for joining and contributing to the community in that way. We manage that through a Survey 123 distribution list. Link later to join. Make sure you are on that distribution list for the GIO's office. We provided brief daily recaps, but the overall goal was kind of to mainly present new information and resources. And in the content that we shared, we made sure to highlight what was new. So it really stood out, and you didn't have to kind of sift through multiple pages to get to the information that you needed. And a specific focus was having a single authoritative data source for the state. So FDEM and CERT's GeoPortal, we and Kim here at the GIOs didn't want to duplicate data, right? We didn't want to duplicate effort and duplicate data. So it was really important that whoever was the source for that data and that content was referenced appropriately, and that we weren't trying to duplicate that said effort. So it's sharing out the location for those geo resources. And some comments from Daniel Rydell, FDM's GIS administrator, is that he had mentioned that even on the federal side, the coordination seemed to really be going places they hadn't quite got to before. That also was facilitated by Esri's participation on those GIS calls, and they were able to answer a number of questions and supply individuals with data basically almost in real time, right then and there. So integration with GIS and web EOC also really took off. And there was a lot of response from the crowdsourced high watermarks app that will absolutely be utilized in future events. This is the Florida Geographic information.
Parker.
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you because this is really good information, but I kind of want to respect Addie's time. So will you be able to go ahead and make this PowerPoint slideshow or whatever it is available after the conference, or?
Absolutely. And Steve, I am so sorry. I didn't realize that I was running out of time there. I thought I had 30 minutes. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. So.
Well,
So
I
sorry,
hate to be
guys.
I hate to be the bad guy. You know, somebody's got to be the bad guy. So they said, Steve, go ahead and be the bad guy. But but I certainly appreciate an excellent presentation. I do want to go ahead and allow some time for one or two quick questions for Parker. Does anybody have anything they want to put in chat or kind of unmute themselves and ask him directly on this great presentation? You're going to let Parker off that easy?
Well, and I was
Steve,
so close. So here I was right there, but
Sorry.
No, absolutely. Thank you for keeping me on track there. I could talk GIS for hours. So
Same as me. Look, did you have something?
I just had a quick question. I work for a company that deals with solid waste and debris management, I'm wondering, how debris management fits into this process, but maybe that's for another time.
Sure. Quickly, the debris management was actually managed through FDM, Division of Emergency Management. So I honestly couldn't speak too much on that. I would suggest kind of reaching out to Daniel Rydell over there. If you want to email me, I'd be happy to share his contact information to talk further about that. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah. There are staging areas around the state for debris, but
yeah, debris pickup is definitely critical because you want to get cleaned up as soon as after people clean up their yards, make big sacks of debris, and they want it to be gone. Don't realize that. Well, Hillsborough County, for one thing, is pretty darn big, but it might take a few weeks. But anyways, thank you very much, Park. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions. Excellent presentation, because we all know how critical GIS is when a hurricane or tropical storm hits. And he kind of mentioned something I totally forgot to say during my opener, was the reason that we didn't have the original virtual conference on November 10th was because of Hurricane Nicole. Okay, so you can't get ready for a virtual conference and you can't get ready for a hurricane at the same time when you have limited GIS staff that are trying to do both. So we decided, you know what? No, I hate seeing my face all big like that. But so anyways, that is the reason. So you kind of jog my memory there. I need more jogging on my memory as the years go by. But thank you, Parker. We're going to move on. I'm going to introduce our second speaker, Addie Javed. Hopefully he's a co-host now. I think he's trying to share his screen right now. I want to introduce Addie. Am I saying that right, Addie?
You are, Addie.
Addie Javed, Development Manager for Mott McDaniel, Principal of EPIC and APWA Florida Leadership and Management Committee Chair. Probably everybody else knows what APWA is. Addie Javed is a former, municipal county engineer and public works director, nationally recognized by the Engineering News Record, National Civil Engineering News Magazine, and Florida City and County Management Association. He has more than 28 years of technical administration, management, and supervisory experience, leading diverse teams and managing multiple capital improvement projects and programs. He has a strong background in public works, environmental management, utilities, and other areas. At Mott McDaniel, he is a development manager in charge of client success. He is a client success executive and has oversight of the Florida-based projects, and is a public works and administration subject matter expert, supports project teams nationwide. That's a lot. So he's going to be talking about GIS as a building block for digital transformation. Addie, take it away.
Thank you, Steve, for that kind introduction. I know it was a mouthful, and it's always a pleasure to come back and talk to my peers, especially in the public sector. So I'm excited to be here. If you feel a little I am a little jumpy right now, I'm been on medicine, taking some medication because of my dislocated shoulder. So, excuse me for that. But hopefully you can hear me loud and clear. And just wanted to say that APWA stands for American Public Works Association. My apologies if it wasn't spelled out. It's a public works association that deals with the agencies pretty much nationwide. So all cities and counties are typically members of that. Obviously, I was gonna also say that as a professional engineer, sometimes in the beginning, I used to feel out of my element, especially when I'm talking to GIS folks, but I've been in the GIS field now for close to 20 years. And I was gonna share that actually one of my first assignments when I got hired by Sarasota County almost 20 years ago was a GIS data collection related to stormwater asset management program. And the reason for sharing that story today is that my presentation is going to hinge on three key topics. Obviously, one is digital transformation, the second one is GIS, and the third one is asset management. I know our previous presenter, Parker, talked about the emergency operations side of it, but I'm going to talk about the infrastructure asset management in general, like how you can use digital transformation and GIS as building blocks when you're looking at your infrastructure for your entire community, for your city or your county. So let the game begin. So again, thank you, Steve, and everybody else for giving me the opportunity to talk to everybody today. All right, so I would like to begin with a saying or a quote from one of the books that was written by Nate Silver, and one of the cool comments he says is that in this age of the information, the amount of knowledge is increasing in the world, but sometimes also the gap between what we know versus what we think we may know is also increasing. So today's I guess focus of our discussion is to make sure that we can close that gap. As we all know these days, there's so much information, what I call TMI, that sometimes we're swimming in data, but we don't know exactly how to decipher the information and get the information we need to make actionable insights. So hopefully, I'll be able to share some best practices and some of the trends that are currently helping us shape the discussion on digital transformation and to use this data insights intelligently. All right, before I go a little bit into more of the discussion, I also wanted to, I guess, do a shameless plug for an article that I wrote for American Public Works Association that got published earlier in the month. And again, it's on enterprise digital twin as a building block in infrastructure asset management. There is a link, or you can also Google it online. So first of all, let's talk about what is digital transformation and digital twin. I know these are like the other buzzwords like sustainability, resilience, sounds pretty cool, but sometimes, a lot of people are still wondering what it means. So just a little bit about digital twin. So digital twin is basically a digital representation of any physical asset, system, or a process that we may be responsible for maintaining or for basically responsible for studying. And you can use this digital twin to run either mathematical modeling, or you can do simulations and basically run scenarios in virtual reality to see, how you can proactively do certain things related to maintenance and the preservation of your assets. Whereas digital transformation is a concept, a robust approach to mapping your business's processes and to basically also capture the data-driven decision-making processes. And I know the next thing I'm going to say, it might resonate with a lot of people. Over the years, a lot of agencies have had so many different softwares, platforms, and sometimes it feels like it's a piecemeal approach. What I offer, or what I would suggest is that, and I've seen that transformation actually within the last 5 years, a lot more agencies are actually sitting down now and trying to come up with a roadmap of different platforms that they want to use, but they want to make sure that, or you want to make sure as an agency that when you're trying to basically, put all these different platforms together, that they talk to each other. I remember back in the days, actually almost 15 years ago, working for an agency, we had different platforms. There was one called Maximo for O&M. There was also a GIS group using all the S3 GIS apps and programs. And then we had a capital program team that was using all the capital program platforms. But what was interesting that sometimes these three platforms would not communicate or talk to each other, and it was really difficult to extract the information or basically share the information between different groups using these different platforms. Obviously, we have come a long way, and GIS integration with other platforms has been a really successful ingredient in doing that. But still, just wanted to make everybody aware that please consider this as part of your roadmap when you're trying to use GIS and digital transformation as the next step to move into the future. All right, so how you can use GIS as a digital transformation platform. I wanted to, I guess, quickly share a study that was done back in 2017, almost 5 years ago, where folks determined that GIS technology can boost usage rate by translating Internet of Things data into actionable insights. And we know now that is in fact true. So, I guess it was just a matter of time before that survey results could basically be proven by the practical results. I know I don't want to bore everybody with what the Internet of Things technology means, but basically, the smart devices we use, the cameras, sensors, and everything else, all the mobile apps that we use, you can use that information to collect the data and actually also have that information mapped on a digital map as well. Okay, next would like to briefly talk about the data science. Obviously, just like I mentioned, there's the concept of digital twins. So in essence, what you're trying to do is you're trying to digitally map those physical assets, whether, as a public service agency, you're responsible for your water, wastewater treatment plants, your distribution systems, your roadways, your stormwater systems. You can pretty much map all these physical assets and have that in your GIS. The cool thing with GIS is that in addition to those geographical locations, you can also add other archived information related to those assets that could include your historical conditions of your data. It can also include maybe your videos. It can also include your CAD drawings and stuff like that. And in addition to that, you can also have your operations and maintenance folks out in the field, or even your EOC folks out in the field, add physical characteristics of your infrastructure assets remotely using your iPads, your phones. So it's pretty cool that you can have all this information at your disposal, at your fingertips, in a virtual setting, and you can use that information to make decisions. It does, like maybe, 15, 20 years ago, you had to go out in the field. Now, the cool thing is sometimes you can look at some of your assets in GIS, look at all the features and make certain decisions related to those assets, even before you set your foot out on the ground. So let's briefly talk about some of the trends that are driving the need for this digital transformation. Obviously, you know, I think even after COVID now, we're more digital savvy, you know, we're working remotely, and technology has, which probably in the past used to be something like considered as a want, is now a need. You know, the simple example I can give is our cell phones. You know, without our smartphones, I think, you know, our life would be choked. So we would not be able to perform half of the things that now we can do remotely. Like even you can do your banking online using your smartphone, where before you had to go to the bank. Same thing, you know, when you're looking at your assets, you can pretty much map and make a lot of decisions remotely. Obviously, the other cool or great thing with GIS and some of these digital platforms is the ability to interact with your residents. The residents can also have all this information at their fingertips, you know, and especially as more and more agencies are trying to be more transparent, they're trying to be, I guess, trying to put more emphasis on additional communication with their residents, trying to trying to help them keep up with what's going on in their communities. It's key that, you know, those residents and community stakeholders are able to have access to this information. You can have interactive GIS maps. I know when I was working for one of the public agencies, we had all our CIP programs, we had all our operations and maintenance programs plugged in online. So let's say, you know, if resident A, or if one of you are wondering that on my street, you know, when they're going to come and fix the potholes, whether it's scheduled for 2023 or 2025, you can just pretty much go online, look up your neighborhood and see when is it scheduled. So it kind of not only cuts down I guess the steps that somebody needs to take to access the information, but it also helps them stay updated within a fraction of time compared to what it used to be in the past. Obviously, the third key thing, you know, that is driving these digital transformation related trends is the demand for more precise data. People are wondering, even your elected officials, you know, when you make your business cases to your elected officials, your city and county management offices, you know, they're wondering what is the return on the investment. So let's say if you're going to rehab or preserve some of your stormwater pipes, you know, if you're going to spend $5, how is that going to help you, you know, look at the bigger picture, and whether that $5 that you spend today is going to translate into saving $50 for you over the course of next 10, maybe 15 years. So that's a big deal. Same thing, you know, it also helps you manage your risk. It helps you have information at your fingertips that you can use to make a decision. Let's say you have key infrastructure close to key facilities like your emergency operations center, your hospitals, your schools, you know, how you want to make sure that your infrastructure is in pristine condition. So in case there is a hurricane or if there's a big sinkhole, that, you know, the folks are still able to reach to the hospital, you know, you're still able to provide the emergency services that are needed. So just some key things that are driving the need for this digital transformation. All right, in this slide, would like to briefly talk about the three components of digital transformation. Now, I think these three components are vital to the success of any kind of transformation, not just digital transformation, but even your leadership transformation or, you know, service transformation. And these three components are basically your people, your processes, and technology. So, whenever the stakeholders sit down to talk about how we bring about the digital transformation, please factor these three components in your discussions. Have the list of the processes, maybe have a roadmap of the processes that might be in place at your agency right now. Create a list of technologies or the platforms that you are using. Make sure that you're able to come up with the way to link those technologies. So, technology A can communicate information with technology B. Another key thing that I would like to highlight as part of the people side of this discussion is that sometimes, different people have different nomenclature, like the example that I shared with you previously, where, there were 3 different teams that were responsible for capital infrastructure, and that included your capital project team, your operations and maintenance, and your GIS team. But all those 3 teams had different nomenclature for the same assets. So make sure that when people are talking to each other, they have the same nomenclature. Otherwise, sometimes the information can be lost in translation. All right. So I know I've mentioned this a few times, and I will say it one more time, that system integration between these different platforms is the key. You have to make sure that your emergency response information is being communicated with your asset management. And if you're doing any kind of analysis in your SWGIS platform, that can be communicated with your stakeholders, that can basically be shared with your operations people. So systems integration is very important. And obviously, one of the other things related to digital transformation is the modeling side. You're trying to use the existing condition information. You're trying to use the existing information to predict what those infrastructure maybe in the future, in like maybe in next 5 years, in next 10 years. And based on that, you're trying to make decisions on how to invest in keeping up with the maintenance of those assets, whether you have to do a major reconstruction project, or maybe you can go in there and do some preservation treatments to prolong the life of your assets. I quickly wanted to also share a survey that we had recently done using LinkedIn. And what's interesting, and I'm actually glad to see the results the way they are, is that a lot of agencies these days feel, or actually, are comfortable using not only technology, but also are very comfortable using the asset management tools that they may be using. And you can flip this information. Maybe 10 years ago, it was the other way around. Like, people had technology, but maybe did not understand how to use the asset management or how to use the GIS tools. But that has changed. More and more agencies, more and more people are getting comfortable with the two in this digital transformation era, and are able to, use the information the best they can. I also wanted to link all this discussion about digital transformation to smart cities. I know, smart city has been around the block for some time now, and a lot more agencies and a lot more communities are getting online. Tesla is one such example. I know I'm hoping for that day where maybe, the fleet in different cities and communities can also are able to basically, deploy some Tesla type fleet. That might be a game changer, who knows? But there is a great potential, and you can use that information to again make a lot of decisions as you're just driving by. So something to think about. Bringing this discussion to a closure, I would like to maybe highlight some of the benefits that I've kind of touched upon in my presentation today, that how enterprise digital transformation platforms such as SWGIS can help any agency or any firm that are trying to provide public service to their constituents or to the residents of the community. the number one thing is it improves efficiency, where before you had to maybe wait days or weeks to collect the information. Now most of that information is already at your fingertips, and you can use that information to make decisions quicker. The other cool thing with this technology is that you can make it as flexible as possible. So basically these platforms can adapt to the changing tides. You know, it can help you stay sustainable during change. The other cool things or the benefit of the enterprise digital transformation is that it helps you make decisions proactively. So you basically are able to respond proactively, like during the emergency operations. I know I have used this several times, like in case of different hurricanes, that you can go out in the field with your operations and maintenance people, maybe a month, maybe a few weeks before the hurricane is coming your way, and you can proactively clean up your network, clean up your like stormwater system to make sure that it can handle any peaks and valleys because of the high water tables, or because of the storm related flooding that you're going to encounter during hurricanes. So it's key that you can use this information to make not only make better decisions, but actually make proactive decisions to react to some of the emergency situations. So quickly want to talk about the future of digital transformation and GIS in the field of infrastructure asset management. So basically, you know, you can use GIS and your digital transformation platforms to gain insights into the performance of your assets. Like, okay, you know, based on the existing condition of your pipes, your roadway networks, what the performance of those assets would be in next 5 years. Maybe something is operating at level of service C, but if you don't do anything to keep up with the performance or the condition of that asset, that is going to deteriorate, and maybe the level of service in 5 years might be D or E. So it gives you the information, it gives you the data, it gives you the insight that you may need to request funding for improving the performance of your assets. The second thing is basically, you know, it helps you in deciding how to invest in your infrastructure, whether you want to do full-blown reconstruction projects, or you want to maybe do some preservation and rehab techniques. And sometimes, in my experience, by deploying these preservation and rehab techniques, you can save quite a bit in construction money. So instead of maybe spending millions, you're spending only a few hundred thousands, and you're able to extend the life of your assets. And obviously the third thing, this is key, is to have optimized work plans that you can share with your stakeholders, with your elected officials, because a lot of times, you know, our taxpayers are wondering, okay, you know, I'm paying these taxes, where is this funding going? Where are these funds being spent? So you can share this information and stays transparent. And all of this can be done in your GIS platforms. And you can share that information with your residents so they have access to this interactively. I know I blabbed quite a bit of information, but what I wanted to say, at least in the end, is that if nothing else that I said made any sense to you, just remember that digital transformation stands for, you know, data-driven decision making. We have so much data, but if the right data is used to get actionable insights, that's the way of the future. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Addie. There's a lot of good information there. So at this time, I want to open it up and see if anybody has any questions. See, Brooke is putting her hands together, her virtual clapping. So we have, don't let the number of people, we have 85 people on the call, but if you have a question, go ahead and throw it out there. This is your opportunity.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Brooke.
What public works departments do you find are the most resistant to this digital transformation? As I stated in the earlier presentation, I work for a consultant that does solid waste design, et cetera. And I find that when I interact with municipalities, et cetera, their solid waste departments are left out of the GIS. Do you find that there are any other public works departments that are in a similar position?
There are a few, but I think in my experience, the operations and maintenance side of the house, that's where people are more resistant, because from their perspective, sometimes they feel you're just adding more layers of paperwork. They want to do work out in the field. They want to be able to do things. And that's the same thing with solid waste people. Most of those people or folks are people who likes to do things out in the field or in the treatment plants and stuff like that. So when you add all this paperwork in there, they sometimes feel that you're taking away key, I guess, time from their actual work. And that's been my experience. And I used to actually kid around that anytime you want to break any of these digital transformation platforms, give it to my O&M people, because I remember when they would go out in the field, trying to plug in all this data that they're trying to collect out in the field, and a lot of information going back and forth. There were always a lot of phone calls that I would get that, okay, I'm trying to use this GIS platform, trying to enter data, and nothing is going there. And I'm so frustrated that I have to do the same thing 5 times. So, that's one area where I've seen that the O&M people are really resistant to it. But I would like to, if I have a minute, to share one way where I think we can get over that hump. And what I've done is that sometimes I've given these cool gadgets to the operations and maintenance people and let them play with it. So just like, your smart tablets and stuff like that, we're so hooked on to use the same technique to give them some tools and let them get comfortable with it. And then also plant some super users within those teams. So anytime, any of the folks run into issues, they can call somebody that they feel comfortable talking to, some of their peers, who are in the same field. But that's just my experience. Hopefully that answers your question, ma'am.
It does. I usually take the humor me approach, see if you like it, which is, yeah, very similar. So thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Did anybody else have a question? I thought Gustavo, if I'm saying it right, might have one time had a question. I saw your hand up. Did you get your question answered? I'm going to assume yes.
Thank you.
Okay, absolutely. So Addie, thank you very much. I think one thing that resonates for me from your presentation is it allows agencies, if they so choose, to be transparent, and it empowers the public. And if I was a local agency, a city or a county government, I would embrace it to just improve basically the relationship with the electorate. So I'm waiting for that to happen. But thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate it. That was a lot of good information. So we're going to move on now.
Thank you.
We're going to move on. Yep, absolutely. We're going to move on to the next presentation before our session 1 break. So we have Emily McDaniel. Emily McDaniel is an intern. It's great to see that we're getting all the perspectives from experienced people to interns and the whole gamut. So in 2009, Emily moved to Florida from Ohio. Good move, Emily, in search of a new start. This unplanned adventure led her to various locations in Florida, volunteering for many different organizations to help endangered species and protect natural resources. In May 2019, Emily graduated from Ecker College with a degree in environmental studies and biology and was accepted into a graduate program at the University of West Florida. Recently, she completed the USFWS, I do know what that stands for, Directorate Fellowship Program with a project focused on advanced applications for conserving listed species. Currently, Emily is enjoying her part-time position at the Clearwater Marine Aquarium, cool, while focusing on her student GIS internship with SWFWMD. Emily will be speaking. Oh, I don't have this subject for you. That's why I have this up right here. LiDAR quality control and enhancement processes and interns perspective. Thank you, Emily. I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. Can everyone see my screen and hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm excited to be talking today a little bit from, again, an intern's perspective of what the quality control and enhancement processes look like. I represent today the Southwest Florida Water Management District from the Data Collection Bureau. And the Southwest Florida Water Management District is one of 5 water management districts here in the state of Florida, which many of you might already know. Something that is good to pinpoint about that is that we were established in 1961 to serve the people. So we are trying to meet the public's water needs. And one of the many things that we do to help meet that need is we quality control, or we go over other projects such as LiDAR. And this is a teamwork effort. So just kind of giving a little shout out here to some of our external collaborators. The most recent project that we were working on was LiDAR QC for the acquisition of imagery from the USGS. And we were also working alongside Dewberry for this particular project. Now, I also want to emphasize the internal communication that it takes to make this happen. As many of you know, you need the team and every part of it to not only perform what we're supposed to be doing, of course, but to communicate it, tell each other what's going on, keep dates up on our checklist so that we know who is where, which prevents the idea that we're going to double our workload by repeating things that aren't necessary. Additionally, we did have meetings. So once we go through this process, we can all sit together, critique each other's work, and look for anything that we might have missed. Because of course, looking at imagery, sometimes you pick up things along the way and you just want to make sure that it doesn't get missed. Now, one of the big challenges of this process, especially with as many entities that are involved, is that deadlines are often closer than they appear. So a lot of times when we first get these deliverables, we're looking at what feels like a lot of time, months in some cases, to get all this done. And once it starts to come, we sometimes see problems. And one of the first things that we saw is that this agreement was established for September 2019. And that means that we were affected by the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. Once one of us gets backed up, it's kind of a pile-up situation. It snowballs. It becomes like, oh, we're a couple days behind, and then someone else will run behind, and before you know it, you're 20 days behind. Luckily, in this case, we did get an extension, and we were able to come ahead of that extension. So even despite all of the delays that have occurred, we have stayed mostly on schedule. Our high resolution digital elevation models for flooding, storm surge analysis, progress reports, geodatabases were the goal. And these are some of the deliverables that we had for the specific LiDAR project. Now, something that goes along with that is our enhancement project, which is directly through the district. That began in March 2020, and our pilots got started a little bit late also because of the overlap from the pandemic. But again, we're running on time. We're actually about to finish up this particular part of our project. And there are some workflow differences. It is good to note that this is one of the largest projects that we've ever taken on. It is the largest LiDAR QC project we've ever taken on. And it totaled over 9,600 tiles, 8 full counties, 6 partial counties. And that is the majority of our entire district. Now, this is where I throw in a little bit of a Doctor Who theme for the wibbly wobbly timey-wimey stuff, because the idea here is that this is all sequences. So we need one task in order to go into the other. So we do have 3 levels. Now the level 1 tasks are dependent in order to get done with the level 2 and etc., except that in a lot of cases we ran into either trouble with a delivery or trouble with data itself that we need to troubleshoot. So there's a little bit of hopping around, a little bit of this and that. Once we get our data transferred over, you can kind of hand pick some of these tasks, like for example, our class 6 building rooftops, which is a manual inspection of going through and zooming in and checking things out. Or we can also go through and do global mapper. And we were using a Python script that would do a lot of this automatically, so that all we would have to do afterward for the manual part is to go zoom in and make sure that it was correct. But it takes a lot of time, and some of the tiles went more quickly than others. Some counties were easier than others. So while waiting on that, you could work on different tasks. Now the workflow changed, like I had mentioned, for that enhancement part of our project. Although a lot of it was set up the same way, we ended up with a couple of different goals. A couple to note are the building courtyards, because a lot of times when we are extracting this data, it doesn't compensate for the areas of ground that show between buildings. And that is something that we definitely want to make sure that gets delineated in our information. Now, additionally, we were doing some checkups on things like metadata. And one of the things I'm working on right now is actually Polk County's missing islands, water bodies, and then of course those courtyards, which we have streamlined to do all at once. And it can be quite a process for some counties more than others. As many of you that work with any Florida data know, there's a lot of lakes in Polk County, and a lot of them do get missed. Now, here's an example of what I was talking about when it comes to our building extraction. You can see that on the left-hand side, we have a building that's showing ground where it should be. But on the right-hand side, our extraction there didn't pick up that courtyard. So that would be one of many things that we were looking for. Usually larger errors are a little bit more relevant, and then that's especially along the coastal areas. And then the point of the missing water bodies and islands is a little bit more important than it probably sounds. We are making sure that our water is showing the correct capacity. So if we have water bodies that are missing, then it might show elevation that isn't there, which means that water flows will be interrupted later on if someone's using this data to try to predict our 100-year flood or another hurricane event like Hurricane Ian. Then we need to know where that water is going to go, how much of it is going to collect where. And that can be one of those little small things in our imagery that can be a big deal. And that's the opposite way with our missing islands, which is going to raise that surface to show where the water is not. And you can see in this image here that if we don't show those islands, then we're going to show more capacity for water than what we have. Now, when it comes to the intern perspective of all this, I came on board when we started this QC process, and it has been a really great project in regards to getting used to the way that QC processes work because of the power of repetition. Every time we get a county, we run through the same levels, the same tasks, and we repeat them over and over again. So we have a standardized QC checklist, fill out that list, communicate to our project manager where we are and what we're doing. Repeating tasks, especially as we're troubleshooting, if there's any mistakes, if there's any problems. And then, of course, we have our scope of work differences that can show up, especially when we're dealing with different entities that are delivering our information, because sometimes there's a little bit of subjectivity in the way that those are approached. Our lessons learned are significant, but a few of them are, of course, our navigation, item locations. Where is the data located? For an intern, that's a big deal. When you first come on and you're looking at these folders and these geodatabases, it can be a little overwhelming to be like, okay, my imagery from 2020 is here, or my geodatabase that's going to be delivered to the clients over here. And that in itself is a learning curve. Simple errors can be a bit tedious to identify, but they're usually quicker to correct. Or our complicated mistakes can be pretty significant, take a little bit longer, especially if it takes us a minute to figure out what the problem is. Time is always against us. Time management is significant when it comes to these types of processes, because like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, if we get held up, that means that whoever's after us will be held up, and vice versa. And then, of course, tracking. Back to the idea that we are working as a team, communication is essential to make sure that we're on track and on the same page. I just want to take a minute to thank everybody so much for listening to my quick presentation, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Emily. That's a lot of information in a small amount of time. Good presentation. You have a bright future for sure. So a lot of good information on LiDAR. Coming technology, you get a lot of information from LiDAR. So it doesn't require you to go out in traffic. So Anybody have any questions for Emily before we go to break number 1? Going once. Well, you are letting the presenters off awfully easily today. So, okay. Well, thank you, Emily. Certainly appreciate it. You're welcome to stick around. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Well done. Okay, that concludes session 1. I want to thank everybody. We're going to go to a break. We've got a break scheduled between now and 10:40. Was it 10:45? Was that it? Okay, at 10:45 is the next presentation with Ryan Beggy from Manatee County. I will not be your room host. You'll see a you'll see a different face on the screen. I think Ashley is going to go ahead and take over room hosting responsibilities. So, want to thank everybody. You can go ahead and stay on the line. Wendy, do you have a timer for us? Not to put you on the spot. You look at there. Why? That's awesome. So we will go by Wendy's official timer. We will see you in approximately 14. Oh, okay. We can give us a little extra time there in approximately 17 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off for right now. I will see everybody at 10:45. Thank you.